Today, we are talking about a gun with one of the absolute worst reputations to come out of World War II. It's the M50 Reising. You know, some weapons become these legends of warfare, but this one? Well, this one became a total cautionary tale for the U.S. Marines who had to carry it into the jungles of the Pacific. I mean, that quote says everything, doesn't it? When a CO would rather his men just throw their rifles into a swamp, you know something has gone terribly, terribly wrong. This one sentence from an officer on Guadalcanal just perfectly sums up the legacy of the Reising. So, how did it even get to that point? Let's rewind the clock to 1941. The U.S. has just been plunged into war after Pearl Harbor, and the Marine Corps is scrambling. They are gearing up to fight in the Pacific, and they desperately need a submachine gun for the kind of up-close, brutal fighting they know is coming. And, well, the Reising was what was available, so it got pushed into service to fill that gap. This meant a whole lot of brand new Marines were handed a brand new, totally unproven weapon, and then sent straight into one of the most vicious campaigns of the entire war, the Battle for Guadalcanal. It was right there, in that suffocating jungle heat and constant mud, that this gun was really going to be put to the test. And, spoiler alerts, it was a test that the Reising failed, just spectacularly. The gun's performance was so bad that it earned the permanent hatred of the men who depended on it. So, what was the deal? What actually went wrong here? Let's break down the guts of this thing. What you're seeing here is basically a perfect storm of everything you don't want in a combat rifle. The Reising was made with these really tight tolerances, which sounds good, but in the jungle it meant that the tiniest bit of dirt or sand could jam it solid. It was also a pain to take apart and clean. But the real kicker? The parts weren't interchangeable. So if your gun broke, you couldn't just cannibalize a part from another broken one to fix it. That is a complete and utter nightmare for battlefield repairs. But as bad as all of that was, believe it or not, the gun's single greatest flaw was that it just couldn't feed ammunition reliably. The magazines were a mess, causing jams all the time, usually at the worst possible moment. And the quote-unquote solution they came up with was just unbelievable. Okay, so originally, the Reising came with a 20-round magazine. Now, even back then, 20 rounds was already considered kind of low for a submachine gun. You want as much firepower as you can get. But the feeding problems were so bad that they had to do something drastic. And here it is. This was the improvement. To make the magazines work a little better, they just cut the capacity down to 12 rounds. 12! Can you imagine being a Marine, hearing the enemy charging through the jungle, and knowing your weapon now holds almost half the ammo it was supposed to? Yeah, no wonder they wanted to throw them away. But the problems weren't just about reliability. Oh no. The Reising was also just a really weird and awkward gun to actually use. Its manual of arms, the whole process of loading it and getting it ready to fire, was unlike pretty much anything else out there, and definitely not in a good way. I mean, just look at this process. This explains it perfectly. The charging handle wasn't on the side or the top where you'd expect it. No, it was this little metal piece hidden inside a slot, underneath the gun. Imagine trying to find that in the dark, in the mud, while people are shooting at you. It was just a recipe for disaster. And the weirdness just kept on coming. It fired from a closed bolt, which is different from the Thompson. That could affect your first shot accuracy. The safety switch was in a spot where it was super easy to bump it off by accident. The mag release was stiff and hard to use, and maybe worst of all, when you ran out of ammo, the gun gave you no warning. The bolt didn't lock back, nothing. Just a silent, useless click when you needed a bang. Of course, you can't really talk about a World War II submachine gun without bringing up the icon, the legend, the M1A1 Thompson. And look, while the Thompson was better in almost every single way, the Reising did have one, surprising, advantage. And here it is. The Thompson was a beast. It was heavy, it was clunky, and it was exhausting to carry around all day. The Reising, for all its many, many flaws, was actually much lighter and way better balanced. And when you're a Marine humping your gear through miles of jungle, that actually makes a huge difference. It's just a real shame the rest of the gun was such a letdown. So what happened to all these Reisings after they were pretty much yanked from the front lines? Well, the gun's story didn't end in the swamps of Guadalcanal. It just took a pretty long and winding road into obscurity. After it flunked out of combat, the Reising was quickly pulled and given to troops in less demanding jobs, like guard duty back in the U.S. After the war, a lot of them were sold off as surplus to police departments. But the gun just never shook its bad reputation, and it kind of faded away,
only to be rediscovered decades later by collectors who are just fascinated by its story.
In the end, the Reising is really just a footnote in the massive history of World War II firearms. It got completely overshadowed by the legendary Thompson and the super effective, super simple M3 grease gun. It's just a reminder that when it comes to combat, a weapon's reputation is built on one thing: reliability. So it leaves us with this really interesting question. Was the M50 Reising a fundamentally bad design from the start? Or was it actually a decent gun that was just forced into a job it was never ever built for? It's a debate that people still have, and it makes the Reising one of the most infamous and frankly most interesting failures of the Second World War. Thanks for joining me on this one.